welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is really to distill a stack of complex sources into pure, actionable knowledge.
Yeah, giving you those aha moments without, all the usual information overload.
Exactly. You're here to get that knowledge quickly, thoroughly. And today, wow, we're journeying back, late 1970s.
We are. We're looking at some real technological risk takers.
Yeah.
The Electro Harmonix rhythm series.
Right, the crash pad space drum, super space drum. We're peeling back the layers on these three really unusual devices.
Definitely unusual. Well, most people think EHX, they think Big Muff, maybe the deluxe memory man delay, legendary stuff.
Sure.
But these three, they just sort of defy categorization. They really blurred the line between like a simple effects pedal and a full-on standalone instrument.
We've got some great material detailing this trio, these experiments,
Mm-hmm.
and they reveal something really core about EHX's innovation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to show you today is that these weren't just, quirky effects you'd stick in your signal chain.
No, not at all.
They were fundamentally affordable analog percussion synthesizers, real sound generators.
Hidden right there in that familiar stomp box shell. And that disguise, that's kind of crucial, isn't it?
It really is.
Because that decision, to package complex synth architecture into a pedal format,
Yeah.
that was just radical for the time.
Yeah, radical is the
It
word.
wasn't just some marketing gimmick either. It really cemented EHX's reputation as this genuinely fearless innovator.
Willing to build tools the market didn't even know it needed yet.
Exactly.
So let's set the stage a bit, because understanding the world these pedals landed in kind of explains why they even existed.
Right.
The late 70s wasn't just bell-bottoms and disco, though there was plenty of that. It was also this revolution in rhythmic technology.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And EHX was ready to take a plunge, kind of a cosmic plunge, into synth percussion.
Yeah, to really get the rhythm series, you have to grasp the vibe musically and technologically around 78, 79.
Okay.
It was this massive inflection point for rhythm. I mean, you saw disco absolutely ascendant.
Funk was getting super complex, intricate rhythms. And you had the very first pulses of electronic music really starting to take root.
And all these genres, they needed something new, right? Something different from acoustic drums.
They demanded rhythmic sounds that were, tighter, more repeatable, maybe more synthetic than what traditional acoustic drums could easily offer.
Yeah, suddenly those traditional kits might have sounded a bit, dusty compared to the electronic sheen starting to appear on records.
That's a good way to put it. And this created huge pressure, but also, like you said, huge opportunity for electronic drum alternatives.
So what were the big players then? What defined the sound?
Well, you had a couple of key benchmarks defining the cutting edge. On one hand, there was the Roland CR78 CompuRhythm, groundbreaking machine.
Ah, yes, the CR78, iconic.
Totally. Sophisticated, microprocessor controlled, known for those really elegant preset rhythms, those polished Latin and pop beats you heard everywhere.
Instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
But pricey, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Expensive. Often well over $1,000 back then, which was serious money. And the sounds were pretty much fixed. You got what you got.
Okay, so that's the studio side. What about live?
Right. For the live sound of electronic drumming, you had the early Simmons drum kits starting to appear, those classic hexagonal pads.
With hexagons. Yeah.
They brought synthesized drum tones, those sharp-pitched kind of artificial sounds right onto the stage. That was a big signal. Electronic percussion was now a performance tool, not just some studio trick.
Gotcha. So you had the CR78 for polished presets, Simmons for live synth drums. But the common thread.
The price tag. Both the CR78 and those early high-end Simmons kits, they were instruments for pro studios, for well-off musicians.
Not exactly democratic.
Not at all. They weren't affordable, widely accessible tools for your average working musician or, the kid experimenting in their bedroom.
That's where Mike Matthews steps in, the EHX guy.
Exactly. The tireless entrepreneur behind Electro Harmonix, he saw that gap. He saw the high price of dedicated drum synths.
And he asked that classic EHX question, basically.
Yeah.
How do we make this cool tech cheap and easy?
Pretty much. How can we take the core idea of analog percussion synthesis and make it accessible, affordable, and crucially, easy to integrate into existing setups?
So the vision wasn't just another guitar pedal.
No. The sources are clear on this. The vision was focused on democratic sound design. These weren't just for guitarists. They were meant for, anyone.
Like who?
Drummers needing new sounds, obviously. Keyboard players maybe wanting percussive triggers. Producers looking for cheap, distinctive analog tones.
And maybe even those experimental guitarists looking for noise.
And yeah, absolutely them too. It wasn't just about the mainstream market.
It's important to stress that shift, right?
Yeah.
EHX usually modified sounds, fuzz, delay, phase.
Right. Filters, modulators.
But with the Rhythm series, they pivoted. They started creating sounds entirely from scratch.
Yeah, that's a fundamental difference.
Which is why our source material calls the Rhythm series one of the most, maybe the most unusual product lines in the whole EHX catalog.
Because they weren't really pedals in the traditional sense. They were mini synths. Single function, maybe, but synths nonetheless.
Designed not to have a guitar plugged into them, necessarily.
Right. Which radically changes what you even mean by pedal. It stopped being an effect you put after your instrument.
And became its own voice.
Exactly. An independent voice, a surprisingly affordable way to get your hands on that exotic world of analog synthesis back then.
And that thinking, that really paved the way for the three units we're about to unpack. Okay, let's transition then. Let's unpack these things individually, starting with the one that was maybe the most purely about noise and impact.
Yeah, let's start with the pedal that really captured the sound of, like, chaos, electronic chaos. The Crash Pad launched in 1979, and its job, its mandate, was pretty clear and pretty destructive. Makes synthetic crash sounds, explosion sounds.
Like sound effects.
Totally. Think late 70s low-budget sci-fi movie sound effects. You know, that electronic thunder, bursts of white noise, those classic laser zaps.
Okay, I can picture that. So how did they get those sounds? What was going on inside the box? The circuitry must have been pretty specific.
It was. At its heart, the Crash Pad used an analog noise generator.
Okay, so just static, white noise.
Pretty much. Pure white noise, random, unpitched static. That's the raw ingredient, the sort of sonic clay for the crash or explosion.
Got it. Raw noise. Then what?
That noise gets fed into a highly tunable resonant filter. And the filter, that's the sculptor here.
Ah, okay. So the noise is just static, but the filter shapes it into something that sounds like percussion.
Precisely. But the real key, the magic ingredient, is the decaying envelope.
Okay, explain that.
Think of the envelope as like a super fast automatic hand. When the sound is triggered, this hand grabs the resonant filter's frequency knob and instantly sweeps it downwards really fast.
Ah, so the pitch drops quickly.
Right. This rapid closing, this falling frequency, it modulates that white noise. It shapes it into a defined, short, transient sound that mimics a sharp acoustic impact, like a cymbal crash. Or it creates that distinctive, sharp, pew quality of a laser gun.
That makes sense of the controls then. You had that sweep knob. That must control how fast that pitch falls.
Exactly. The sweep gave you command over that falling pitch. It was absolutely essential for dialing in the intensity of the zap, how quick, how dramatic that pitch drop was.
Okay, and decay. That seems straightforward.
Yeah, decay is pretty standard for percussion, but crucial. It just governs how long the whole sound lasts. You could have a quick, sharp spike.
Like a zap.
Or dial it up for a long, rumbling electronic thunderclap.
And the last one, resonance.
Resonance. That dictates the sharpness, the peak emphasis of the filter. Crank the resonance, and you get a metallic, ringing, almost whistle-like quality. It really emphasizes that high-frequency edge, makes it cut through.
Gotcha. Now, what's really cool reading about the Crash Pad is the triggering. It wasn't just the foot switch.
Right. That dual triggering capability was key. You had the basic foot switch, sure, for stomping on it manually.
Standard pedal stuff.
But including that external trigger input, wow. In 1979, that was a seriously forward-thinking nod towards, systemic electronic music setups.
It showed they weren't just thinking about guitarists stomping on it.
Absolutely. It signaled that EHX saw this not just as a one-off effect, but potentially as a component in a bigger synth rig, part of a system.
And the Crash Pad's legacy is interesting, too, because it's the only one of the three they actually reissued.
That's right. Alone among the trio, it got a reissue in 2015. EHX brought it back, often in a smaller, more modern box.
More pedal board friendly?
Yeah. But the really crucial update, the thing that made modern players sit up and take notice, was adding CV gate compatibility.
Control voltage, making it play nice with modern synths.
Exactly, and that's why it just exploded in popularity with the modern modular synth crowd. It took that vintage, kind of unpredictable analog noise engine.
And lets you control it precisely with modern voltage standards.
Perfectly put. It proves the actual sound, the sonic texture, is still incredibly valuable. And it shows that the original vision of integrating it into a system was just, way ahead of its time.
And the reissue still has those core controls. Sweep, decay, resonance.
Which tells you the original circuit really nailed the essence of that electronic impact sound. They got it right the first time.
Okay, so from pure noise and crashes, let's shift gears to something more. Tonal. Let's talk Space Drum, also 1979.
Right. If the crash pad handled explosions, the space drum was focused entirely on tonal percussion sounds. Think synth tom-toms, those classic spacey percussive sweeps.
So a different kind of sci-fi sound.
Definitely. The space drum carved out its own unique niche. Its characteristic sound is instantly warmer, maybe more musical than the crash pad.
Like what specifically?
Those deep tonal boom effects, the classic sci-fi movie boop tom sound,
Yeah.
and those really musical disco pew noises you hear all over early 80s dance tracks. Pew.
Okay, I know those sounds. So the circuitry must reflect that focus on tone, not noise.
It does. Instead of starting with a noise generator, the space drum used a dedicated oscillator.
Generating a waveform, a pitch.
Exactly. Combined with an envelope sweep, just like the crash pad. But this time, the whole system was tuned specifically to generate tonal percussion. It was shaping pitch, not just static.
How does that work for drums? How do you get a drum sound from an oscillator?
Well, the core of most synthesized drum sounds is actually a really rapid pitch shift over a very short time.
Okay.
The oscillator generates the basic waveform, maybe a sine wave for a clean boom or a square wave for something punchier. Then the envelope modulates that pitch, makes it drop or maybe even rise extremely fast. That quick pitch change tricks your ear into hearing percussion.
Got it. And the controls let you shape that pitch movement.
Precisely. You have the pitch knob, obviously. That sets the bass frequency, the starting tone, determines if you get a low, subby kick drum sound or a higher, more melodic tom.
Makes sense.
But the real magic, again, was in the swip control. This dictated the range of that pitch bend and, critically, the direction. Yeah. You could make the pitch fall rapidly, which kind of mimics how a real drumhead loses tension and pitch after being hit. That gives you your classic synth tom or kick.
Okay, the natural decay.
But crucially, you could also make the pitch rise sharply, sweep upwards. And that created those totally unnatural, purely electronic laser fire sounds that became just synonymous with synth pop and disco.
The upward pew.
That's the one. And like the crash pad, you had decay controlling the overall length. Short decay for a tight kick or blip.
A long decay
For that ominous, lingering space boom that just hangs in the air. Crank it right up.
And triggering. Same deal.
Identical setup. Foot switch for stomping or that really valuable external trigger input for hooking up pads or sequencers.
But its legacy is different from the crash pad, right? No reissue for this one.
No official reissue, and that's key to its status now. Our sources all confirm the original space drum is incredibly rare and super collectible today.
Why so rare? Just didn't make many.
Probably a combination of factors, maybe lower production numbers, maybe more fell into disrepair. But the result is that combination of its pure 1970s analog oscillator tone and that specific envelope behavior. It's highly sought after. It has a certain sound.
So that rarity means even though the sound was influential, it's hard to get your hands on the real deal.
Exactly. You can't just buy a new one. And because of that pure, maybe slightly unstable, uncut analog tone, it gets cloned a lot.
In software or hardware.
Both, but especially in the modular synth world, Eurorack module makers are constantly trying to meticulously emulate or clone the space drum circuit. People spend serious time and money trying to recapture that specific vintage flavor.
That really shows the lasting power of a sound, even if the original product was maybe a bit too weird for the mainstream back then.
Absolutely. It's a testament to a sound that just hit a nerve, even if the market wasn't quite ready.
Okay, that brings us to the third, the final, and maybe the most mythic piece of this trilogy, the super space drum.
Yeah, hitting the market around 1980, maybe into 81. And this was definitely positioned as the flagship, the expanded, the ultimate version of the space drum idea.
Like they took what worked and pushed it further.
Exactly. This unit feels like EHX took everything they learned from making the first two devices and synthesized it, pardon the pun.
So its purpose, its versatility,
What?
broader.
Significantly broader. Instead of just focusing narrowly on toms or zaps like the first two, the super space drum aimed for like a full spectrum of analog percussion sounds.
And they achieved that through actual circuit upgrades. It wasn't just marketing.
Oh no, genuine circuit advancements. Our sources say it featured a more sophisticated, more flexible oscillator and envelope system.
What does that mean in practice? for the user.
Well, for someone really digging into the sound design, it meant things like improved linearity in the pitch sweep, so the pitch change felt smoother, more controlled, and often it had multiple waveforms you could choose from, or maybe even blend.
So more control over the actual timbre, the tone color, not just the pitch and length.
Precisely. Giving the user far greater sonic sculpting power.
It sounds like EHX was maybe trying to appeal more to the serious electronic musician with this one. Someone needing real precision.
I think so. The sources point out definite control improvements, things like added tuning precision so you could really dial in specific notes if you wanted, and increased sweep options, maybe faster sweeps, wider ranges, just dramatically more flexible than the original space drum.
So what kind of sounds could it make that the others couldn't?
Think of it like this. The original space drum gave you great sci-fi toms and zaps. The super space drum, it could give you a really heavy, punchy, resonant analog kick drum sound.
Okay, getting into more traditional drum kit territory.
Right. Alongside the signature laser effects and melodic toms it inherited, it really became more of a sonic chameleon. It could mimic some traditional acoustic drum sounds pretty convincingly.
While still doing the completely synthetic stuff.
Exactly. Best of both worlds in an analog context.
And the triggering focus here, that really underscores the professional angle, doesn't it?
It really does. It seems explicitly designed to integrate smoothly with the electronic drum pads that were just becoming standardized for live drummers around then.
Like the Simmons pads or early Roland pads, maybe.
Yeah. This was EHX sending a clear message to drummers. Hey, forget just triggering sampled acoustic sounds, which was still pretty new and expensive tech itself. Now you can stick a powerful analog synth drum right into your live kit.
Giving them a bridge between their acoustic setup and the electronic sound.
Right. Reliable, controllable, versatile electronic percussion, and potentially at a lower price point than buying a whole dedicated Simmons or Lindrum setup, which were costly.
But sadly, despite being the super version, it seems like it didn't last long on the market.
Yeah, our sources agree. It seems to have had the shortest production run of the three. Maybe arrived just as market tastes were shifting again, or as EHX started facing some of its later business challenges in the 80s.
And that's why it gets the Holy Grail label from collectors.
That's exactly why. It represents the absolute peak of that initial analog percussion push from EHX right before things changed. Finding an original working super space drum today,
Yeah.
you haven't just found a piece of history. You found arguably the most sonically capable and versatile sound generator of the entire Rhythm series line. It's the one everybody wants.
Okay, so we've dug into the individual personalities, the crash pads noise, the space drums toms, the super's versatility. Now let's zoom out a bit. What did they all share? What was the common DNA here that made them so radical for their time, especially before the whole modular synth boom really took off later?
Well, the first thing you notice if you ever see the originals in person is just the sheer physical size.
Right. They weren't tiny little pedals. They used those really distinctive large box enclosures, big metal boxes.
The same hefty chassis they used for pedals like the legendary Deluxe Memory Man delay or the original Electric Mistress flanger, these things were substantial.
They weren't micro pedals designed to squeeze onto a crowded board. They demanded respect. And quite a bit of pedal board real estate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that physical presence wasn't just an aesthetic choice like, let's make it look imposing. It was a practical necessity.
Driven by what was inside.
Driven by the internal architecture. You know, complex analog synthesis back then, even single function stuff, it just needed space. Space for all the discrete components, resistors, capacitors, transistors that made up the oscillators, the envelopes, the filters, and crucially, the power supply components. Which leads us right to the next big common factor and a major constraint for users back then.
Let me guess. Power.
Power considerations.
Bingo.
These complex beasts required AC mains power. You plug them straight into the wall.
No battery clips inside.
Absolutely no option for battery operation. Zero.
That's a huge tell, isn't it, in the pedal world?
It's a massive historical signpost. Think about it. Your typical guitarist back then was used to running their fuzz pedal or wah off a little 9-volt battery, maybe 2.
Easy peasy.
Right. Suddenly needing dedicated AC power, having a fixed mains cable, that signaled immediately that this device was different. It was drawing significant current. It housed complex, power-hungry electronics.
It wasn't just a passive effect. It demanded instrument-level power.
Exactly. Underscoring their identity, again, as mini synthesizers, not just simple effects pedals.
Okay, size and power, got it. But if we look at the one feature that really makes this whole series feel like a technological marvel, something genuinely ahead of its time, it'd have to be that trigger input, right?
That ubiquitous external trigger input.
Yes.
This is the real innovation, the thing that elevates them beyond just quirky sound boxes. And it's really essential that you, the listener, understand why this was so groundbreaking back then.
Break it down for us. Why was a trigger input on a pedal so weird in, say, 1979?
Because in the late 70s, the whole idea of a guitar effects company putting an input on their pedal specifically designed for sequencers or for drum pads, that was almost unheard of. It just wasn't how pedals were typically conceived.
Pedals were for guitars mostly. Plug guitar on one side, amp out the other, maybe an expression pedal input if you were lucky.
Right. So let's unpack the technical implication here. That external trigger jack. It was essentially implementing CV gate-style triggering.
Control, voltage, and gate, like on big modular synths.
Exactly like on the big modular synths of the day, the Moogs, the Buchlas, the ARPs. Now, these EHX pedals were simpler. They only implemented the gate part.
What does the gate do?
The gate signal is just the simple on-off command. It tells the pedal when to start making its sound. It's like pressing the key on a synth.
Okay.
So if you hit an electronic drum pad that was properly equipped, the pad would send out a short electrical pulse, that's the gate signal down the cable, to the EHX pedal's trigger input.
And the pedal fires off its sound instantly.
Instantly. Zap, boom, pew, whatever you had dialed in. Now, crucially, they didn't have a CV input for controlling the pitch externally.
Ah, okay. So you couldn't sequence melodies on them easily.
Right. They were primarily trigger-based percussion synthesizers. But the fundamental concept of external sequencing, of triggering the sound from something other than the built-in foot switch, was fully realized.
So you weren't limited to just stomping on it. You could hook up, say, a rudimentary sequencer that just sent out trigger pulses?
Absolutely. Or you could even get clever and run the trigger output from a specific drum sound on an existing drum machine, like the rimshot output, into the trigger input of, say, the space drum.
Whoa. So you could layer the space drum sound with your drum machine beat automatically.
Precisely. You were treating the pedal not as this isolated effect box, but as a controllable sound module within a larger electronic music ecosystem.
That is seriously forward-thinking for a pedal company in the late 70s.
It really was. This foresight, this focus on connectivity and interaction. It meant the Rhythm series genuinely anticipated the whole pedal/modular synth crossover craze that only really became a mainstream thing, 30 or 40 years later, in the 2010s?
Yeah, with the rise of Eurorack and semi-modular gear.
It's a real testament to Mike Matthews' vision, I think, that they were thinking systemically, thinking about how these devices could interact, when most of the rest of the pedal world was still just focused on that guitar input and output jack.
That's what makes the series feel, well, technologically prophetic. In hindsight.
Prophetic is a good word for it, absolutely.
Okay, so given how advanced they were, how prophetic the design was, let's talk about how they were actually received back then versus how we see them now. Were they instant hits? Did people get it?
The short answer, no, not really. They kind of suffered from that classic innovator's dilemma, meaning they were maybe too innovative for their own good, commercially speaking. In the late 70s, early 80s, the vast majority of EHX's customer base, remember, were guitar players.
Right, looking for the next cool fuzz or chorus or delay.
Exactly. And most of them just didn't know what to do with a dedicated synthetic percussion generator that you didn't necessarily plug your guitar into. It didn't fit their workflow or their mindset.
So the product was just too far ahead of the curve for the main market to really grasp its potential, its utility.
Pretty much. It really required a niche audience to get it.
And who was that niche audience? Who actually bought these things?
Well, the immediate audience that truly understood and championed the Rhythm series were, firstly, drummers who were actively looking for ways to expand their sonic palette electronically.
Made sense for them.
And secondly, maybe most critically, for their later cult status, it was experimental musicians and noise artists.
Ah, the people who liked weird sounds.
Exactly. Our sources specifically mention that these musicians loved the chaos. They loved the untamed, sometimes unpredictable, raw, analog nature of the sounds these things produce.
They weren't looking for polite sounds.
Not at all. So because they were so specialized and maybe marketed a bit awkwardly, not quite a guitar pedal, not quite a full synth, they never became mass commercial hits. They sold, but not in huge numbers.
Which, of course, contributed to them becoming rare later on.
Definitely fed into their subsequent rarity and mystique.
But time has been kind to them, hasn't it? As often happens with truly innovative, maybe misunderstood hardware. What's the deal today? Why are they so prized now?
Oh, absolutely. Time has definitely elevated their status. The modern audience for these is, well, hyper-specialized. You're talking serious collectors, devoted noise musicians.
We keep coming back to them.
And yes, the modular synth players, people building Eurorack systems who crave unique, characterful analog voices.
And what's the main appeal now? Is it just the rarity or the sound itself?
It's primarily the sound, and specifically, it's that wild, sometimes uncontrollable analog character we talked about.
The imperfection is the point.
That's a huge part of it. These old analog circuits, they drift, they react in slightly unpredictable ways, they produce sounds that have this distinct flavor, this instability, maybe even an inherent randomness sometimes that's just incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to perfectly replicate with digital modeling.
So that analog imperfection, that chaos the early users loved, is now the main attraction.
It really is. It's seen as character, as authenticity.
And that 2015 crash pad reissue, that's kind of the ultimate proof of this demand, right?
Proof positive. The fact that EHX decided to bring that specific circuit back decades later showed there was real market desire for that particular flavor of analog noise generation.
Especially in those experimental scenes.
Exactly. Scenes where unique sonic textures and authentic analog voices are often valued much more highly than, say, pristine digital fidelity or perfect predictability.
And adding the CV gate to the reissue.
That was the clincher. It was like the ultimate market validation. It confirmed that the original sound engine, the core circuit, was fundamentally brilliant and desirable. It was only the interface, the way you controlled it, that needed updating to meet the modern electronic musician's workflow.
The market finally caught up with the tech Matthews pioneered all those years ago.
Perfectly said. The market converged with the technology.
Okay, let's tie this all together then. Let's summarize the historical importance of the Rhythm series for EHX as a company and maybe for electronic music tech more broadly. What are the, say, 3 definitive takeaways our listeners should really absorb from this deep dive?
Okay, 3 key takeaways. First, the radical departure. You absolutely have to see these units not as just weird effects pedals. Think of them as standalone mini percussion synthesizers. That move permanently expanded the definition of what a pedal company could or maybe should be making. They were instruments, first and foremost, not just accessories.
Got it. Radical departure, they were synths. Number 2.
Second, ahead of its time. That design philosophy, particularly centering around the external trigger input, was just revolutionary for a pedal company back then.
Yeah.
Implementing that CV Gate-style triggering in the late 70s, it genuinely anticipated the massive trend of pedal synth integration and voltage control that only really blew up in the 2010s, decades later.
Okay. Ahead of its time, the trigger input was key. And finally,
number 3. The series really solidified EHX's reputation as the fearless innovator. They proved they were willing to push pedals way beyond the traditional limits, to invest R&D into a niche, technically complex, maybe commercially risky product line.
even if they weren't huge sellers initially.
Right. That technological fearlessness, even if it didn't immediately translate into massive sales for these specific units, established the groundwork. It cemented the perception of EHX as a genuine creator, a source of pioneering sonic tools, not just a follower of trends. That reputation is priceless.
Wow. That was a really detailed deep dive into what feels like an absolutely essential piece of gear history. Essential, even if it was kind of commercially misunderstood at the time.
Yeah, a fascinating chapter.
So we've covered a trio, the crash pad, all about explosive noise and zaps, the one that got the modern CV-ready reissue.
Then the space drum, the rarer source of those iconic sci-fi toms and disco sweeps. Highly sought after.
And finally, the super space drum. The expanded, most versatile, and arguably the rarest, the true holy grail of the series for collectors.
That's the lineup.
And the knowledge you've hopefully gained today, listening to this, it really highlights a pattern you see again and again in tech history, doesn't it?
What's that?
That creative hardware design, truly innovative ideas, they often arrive before the market is fully ready to accept or understand them.
That's certainly true here. These pedals weren't waiting for users to figure them out. It feels more like they were waiting for the rest of the music tech world, the modular scene, affordable sequencers to actually catch up to them.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, this whole story kind of invites a final, maybe challenging thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Go on.
We've established that a huge part of the appeal today for these vintage units is precisely their wild, sometimes uncontrollable analog character, that instability, that imperfection.
Right. The chaos factor.
So, if that chaos, that unpredictability inherent in the original circuit design is actually the primary appeal, how successful can modern attempts to capture it really be? Whether it's digital modeling, trying to perfectly emulate it, or even a careful analog reissue that might, by necessity, be a bit more stable or predictable than a 40-year-old original.
That's a great question. Does the pursuit of perfection, whether digital or even just cleaned up analog, risk fundamentally ruining the very magic, the mojo that made these circuits so special and desirable in the first place? Is the flaw the feature?
Exactly, maybe broadening that out.
Consider the wider landscape back then. What other failed experiments, what other niche electronic gadgets from that really pivotal time, the late 70s, early 80s devices that were maybe too weird, too ambitious, too expensive for their era, might still hold some secret, vital building blocks? The DNA for sounds and textures that are highly sought after in modern music production today.
It makes you wonder what other forgotten gems are out there.
It's definitely a worthwhile rabbit hole to explore. That history of commercial failure, sometimes yielding really lasting, profound sonic influence down the line. Fascinating stuff.
We'll leave you with that provocative thought to ponder. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.